I had just moved into a tiny town that was literally in the middle of nowhere and had less than 100 people in total population. I was about 7 at the time, and I had overheard my parents talking about a dog that kept barking all night long, keeping them up. I wanted to help them, so I went out looking for neighbors with dogs to ask if they could maybe keep their dogs from barking all night. So this particular town had a bad track record of houses catching on fire. So there were a lot of old, half-burned or ruined houses that had just been left to the earth. This particular incident happened with one of these ruined houses. As I'm walking around, I hear someone call out to me, and I turn to see a very beautifully kept lawn in front of a nice white 2-story house. There's a nice old couple sitting in lawn chairs out front, and the woman is calling me over. I walk over to the fence. The woman asks me what in doing walking around by myself. I had been living there for about 6 months at that point, so I knew everyone, and it wasn't that weird for parents to let their kids out by themselves. I tell them about the dog and ask if they know about it. The woman says that it is her dog, and she will try and keep it quiet from now on, and then offers me a full-size Snickers bar. I took it. I know don't take candy from strangers, but there was a fence, and also, like I said, it was a very small town, and I wasn't really afraid of anything happening. Feeling like I had accomplished my goal, I went home. At the time, I really wanted to eat the Snickers, but it had melted on my walk back some, so I stuck it in the freezer to chill. Then my friend comes over, and we head over to her house, and I forgot about the candy, wondering how the ruined houses fit into this. Well, when I return home from my friend's house, I tell my mom about the nice couple, and that they would keep their dog quiet. I tell her where the house was, and she gets really confused. What do you mean? There isn't a house there. I would have shown the candy as evidence, but I had totally forgotten about it. After some back and forth, we agreed to go on a walk tomorrow in the daytime, so I can show her which house I mean. Next day, we walked down to where the house was, and there is no house. The well-kept lawn was just overgrown weeds, and the house was nothing more than a pile of rubble. Only the fence still remained. I ran home to show her the candy that I had just remembered about, and that was gone too. Disclaimer: little brother was known for stealing things, so he might have taken it. But still, I still get chills when I pass by that vacant lot to this day, and I am now 20 years old. I was stationed in Seoul, South Korea, several years ago. I was taking a shower in my room, and when I got out, the word "leave" was written in small letters in the fog on the bathroom mirror. I didn't have a roommate because NCOs got their own private rooms. A little freaked out, I decided to do exactly that: leave. I went off post for some Korean BBQ and wandered the city a bit. I came back a couple hours later to find the barracks was evacuated and half burned to the ground. The fire was pinpointed to faulty electrical wiring that caught some insulation on fire inside the walls. Something knew it was going to happen, and to this day, whatever that something was, it didn't want me in the middle of it. I'd gladly thank who, or whatever it is, if they would give me the chance. But it's been years, and I still have no idea. I was 18, and my brother Chris was 16. I also have a brother James, who was 5 at the time. We had just moved into an older house that used to be 3 apartments. We just about finished unpacking, and we designated rooms. James's room was directly above the living room with the staircase. James went up to discover his new room, and Chris and I took a short walk around the neighborhood. We got back and were sitting in the living room, just talking. My mom says she's going to get pizza for dinner and leaves. She took a fairly long time, which is normal for her. I think she really enjoys the small breaks she gets when she can leave the house without James, and I never object to babysitting. Besides, James is plenty occupied with his new room. Chris and I are just talking in the living room. James is super excited about his new bedroom. We hear him running and stomping around upstairs, opening and closing doors. Sometimes he slams the doors pretty hard, but whatever, he's a kid. I assumed he fell asleep since the noise stopped eventually. I hear my mom's car pull up. I get up to meet her in the kitchen. My mom comes in, carrying soda. James follows directly behind her, carrying the food, yelling, "Pizza time!" She took him with her to get dinner, confirmed by my mom. Chris and I just looked at each other, taking too long to comprehend what was happening. I lived in that house for 4 years, and that was the only time something really freaked me out. At my old apartment, I was brushing my teeth, and my makeup bag flew off the shelf and slammed into the wall across the room. No windows, no fan. The bag was all the way on the back of the shelf, against the wall. It did not fall. It flew like the opening pitch. I noped out and went to bed. Next morning, I checked my phone and had a notification from the Sleep Android app. It records movement and sound overnight to wake you at the lightest point in your sleep cycle. I do not sleep talk, and I live alone. I heard on the recording my bedroom door click and creak open. It had a very distinctive creak, and a male voice talking lowly, and then the door closing again. I lived on the 14th story of a building with no balconies. One needs a coded key card to get into the front door, and to use the elevator or open the stairwell, and then to open the door to the hallway, and to get into the front door of the apartment, and to get into my bedroom. So if I go to the bathroom and forget my key card, I'm locked out of my bedroom. It would be insane to break into any of these. I moved out a few months later. I get insomnia. It was one of those nights, and I was sitting out on my back porch at about 4 a.m. smoking a cigarette. It was one of those eerie nights where there is absolutely no breeze and it's just completely quiet out. We have woods behind our house, and as I was sitting there, I see this person making his way through the canopy of the trees, like jumping from tree to tree, 30 or 40 feet up in the air. I was absolutely stunned, just sat there dumbly, too afraid and confused to even get up and run inside the house. This person or thing, or whatever it was, stops directly behind my house and looks at me. At this point, it's about 50 feet away and maybe 40 feet up in the air. It pauses for about 5 seconds, staring in my direction. I'm absolutely certain that it wasn't an animal. Its body was human-shaped, and it definitely wasn't a raccoon, bear, or any of the other things people have suggested it might have been. But the way it was moving through the trees definitely was not human. No human, I don't care how adroit they were, could move like that. It was too dark to make out much detail of the face, clothing, or anything like that. After about 5 seconds of looking at me, it turns away and takes off the same way it had been going before, just leaping from tree to tree at a fast pace. Within a few more seconds, it was out of sight. This is hard to explain, but I want to try. In my childhood home, my bedroom was on the second floor. Only one window. but it was a nice-sized one. I was about 12, and my sister shared the room with me, but was at her dad's that night. I was getting ready for bed. My mom had me getting my pajamas and stuff ready, or whatever, but the room was dark, and I hated when that happened, because I'd have to walk across the room to turn the light on, and it always scared me. Used a lamp that was set up on the other side near the window, and the light switch by the door wasn't connected to anything. Walked over to switch it on, and I swear, saw this human-like type thing, can't even fathom how else to describe it, staring in my bedroom from outside my window. It looked like it was fucking tinted blue. Its face was unlike anything I have ever seen in any movie or literally anything else before. I was on the second floor too, and still somehow saw it so clearly that I remember telling my mom it was like it was floating. Again, it wasn't too late, and I wasn't even close to being asleep at this point, so it definitely wasn't a dream or anything like that. I knew I saw something, and it always stuck with me. I stood and stared at it for a solid few seconds too, before bolting the fuck out of there, because I felt paralyzed. I remember feeling it stare back at me too. I refused to sleep in my bedroom for about a whole year after that, and pretty much moved into the living room and stayed the fuck away from windows. Every time I think about it now, 10 plus years later, I still get a little freaked out. I still always need to make sure every part of all my windows are completely covered by my blinds at night. I've only told my now fiancé about this, other than my family when I was a kid, but wasn't able to explain it properly to him either. Obviously, I know that this is completely ridiculous, but I've still never been able to explain it or the feeling it gave me. Finally got the strength to Google this a few months back and read a bunch of stories about other people experiencing eerily similar things too. So that was slightly comforting, at least. I was house sitting for a period of about 3 weeks during my senior year of high school. The house was on a road that led pretty deep into the mountains, and I was only needed because a neighbor who lived about a half-mile down the hill got mad when the dogs barked at night. I dealt with some actual menaces, mainly scaring coyotes off of the chicken coop, but the entire time I was there, I was never at ease. The house was 3 stories tall, with the main entrance on a porch at the second floor. The bottom floor was mainly like a basement with a pool table, and the door to the stairway was able to be locked, so I kept it like that. Finally, the top floor was just the master bedroom and a balcony inside overlooking the living room. Every night before I slept, I would take the dogs around the house to check every corner because I never felt like I was alone there. Finally, on the last night that I was doing this, the dogs and I finished checking the upstairs and were standing in the living room when the hairs on the back of my neck shot up, and I swear that someone was on the balcony and said, "Shame you leave tomorrow." I was looking forward to playing more. I grabbed the pellet gun for the coyotes and sprinted back up there with the dogs, and nothing. Everything was exactly as it had been the whole time I was there. If anyone more spiritual than me knows anything, I've been trying to figure this situation out forever. I love writing and thinking of stories, though not very good, and was very excited when I took up a short creative writing class. One assignment was to write something that focuses on character development. So, my brain got stuck trying to choose all the stories that I've thought of before. Basically, I had writer's block. So one night, my parents decided to have dinner outside. and we had to drive down a road where the surrounding trees are huge, at least from where I'm from, to get there. We had dinner and left. On the way back, it started raining really heavily, and when we reached home and was all getting ready for bed, there was a power trip, most likely from the storm. That's when I started getting an idea for a story. Basically, my character was afraid of the dark, and my story explored how he developed that fear when he was in a car when he was young, with his mom driving. There was a storm. The road was dark when a giant tree fell onto their car. That's the gist of it. I was proud because it was one of the better stories for the assignment, and the lecturer highlighted it. That is until I went home that night, and there was an accident in the news. An uprooted tree fell down onto the road, and a car hit it. I think it was the first time I felt actual chills down my spine, and it wasn't from a movie. Lived with a ghost for about 2 years. Moved in with my GF and her mom. They told me the house was haunted and told me about all these events that happened. I was young and basically thought they were just screwing with me. Later on, we got a roommate also. So 4 of us in the house. So one night, we are playing cards and drinking. I get up to go to the bathroom and notice that our roommate's door was shut and her light was on, which was odd because I had just walked by it a minute before on my way to the bathroom, and it was open and the light was off. So figured roommate had gone in her room. The bathroom and her room were next to each other, but everyone was in the kitchen the whole time. This house wasn't very big, so I went back into the kitchen and asked our roommate if she had shut her door and left her light on for some reason. She said no, so we went back to her room to open the door, but it was locked. Or so I thought. After pushing on the door, I quickly realized it wasn't locked, but blocked. A large, probably 50-plus LB dresser, being dragged several feet across the bedroom, blocking the door. Basically, from one corner of the room to the door, or about 10 feet. Everyone was just in total disbelief as I forced open the door to an empty room with a light on. All the windows were locked from the inside. Everyone said they had been in the kitchen the whole time. About 30 seconds had passed between the time I first passed the open door and then came back to a closed door, and it was only a minute to talk to my roommate before we discovered the door was blocked. Pretty much impossible for someone to break in, shut door, and move the chest. Also, I was the only male there. The 3 women that were there probably couldn't have moved the chest, as it would have been too heavy for them to move. I have thought about that night a lot, and have no real answer to how that happened, other than the explanation my GF and her mom gave me about the ghost. A lot of odd things happened at that house, but this was by far the most unexplainable one. There wasn't really anyone in the house that could have moved that dresser except me. Sure, the women could have moved it, but in the time it took me to pee, and without making any noise, no one came in through the windows. No one in the room. No one in the closet. Super creepy. Lived with a ghost for about 2 years. Moved in with my GF and her mom. They told me the house was haunted and told me about all these events that happened. I was young and basically thought they were just screwing with me. Later on, we got a roommate also. So 4 of us in the house. So one night, we are playing cards and drinking. I get up to go to the bathroom and notice that our roommate's door was shut and her light was on, which was odd because I had just walked by it a minute before on my way to the bathroom, and it was open and the light was off, so figured roommate had gone in her room. The bathroom and her room were next to each other, but everyone was in the kitchen the whole time. This house wasn't very big, so I went back into the kitchen and asked our roommate if she had shut her door and left her light on for some reason. She said no, so we went back to her room to open the door, but it was locked, or so I thought. After pushing on the door, I quickly realized it wasn't locked, but blocked. A large, probably 50-plus LB dresser, being dragged several feet across the bedroom, blocking the door. Basically, from one corner of the room to the door, or about 10 feet. Everyone was just in total disbelief as I forced open the door to an empty room with the light on. All the windows were locked from the inside. Everyone said they had been in the kitchen the whole time. About 30 seconds had passed between the time I first passed the open door and then came back to a closed door, and it was only a minute to talk to my roommate before we discovered the door was blocked. Pretty much impossible for someone to break in, shut door, and move the chest. Also, I was the only male there. The 3 women that were there probably couldn't have moved the chest, as it would have been too heavy for them to move. I have thought about that night a lot, and have no real answer to how that happened, other than the explanation my GF and her mom gave me about the ghost. A lot of odd things happened at that house, but this was by far the most unexplainable one. There wasn't really anyone in the house that could have moved that dresser except me. Sure, the women could have moved it, but in the time it took me to pee, and without making any noise, no one came in through the windows. No one in the room. No one in the closet. Super creepy. When I was little, my family went to Bodie, CA, a ghost town. At one point, we went into a little museum, and in this museum was an area with larger items, such as a hearse and a little kid's pull toy that has a string on it. Well, I would go over and just stare at this toy. My dad would bring me over by him, and I'd go right back to this toy. Finally asked why I kept going over there, and I said the girl is playing with her toy. We eventually went to leave, and our last stop was the cemetery. My mom was taking me around and was reading headstones, and was going on about infant mortality rates and how this headstone says this person died at 2 weeks old because she's weird. Now, as a 3-year-old who couldn't read yet, this was all going over my head without impact. I get to one headstone, and I just lost it. I'm crying, and it's not. I'm hungry. Tears, it's someone died. I'm heartbroken crying. My parents are asking what's wrong, and I start saying, I'm never going to see her again. She's gone. They ask who's gone, and I reply, the girl that was playing with her toy. We get back to where we were staying, and my mom bought a video about the town and watched it with my grandfather. And at the beginning, they show the headstone, and I just started saying, I'm never going to see her again. Come to find out, I had started crying at the headstone of a girl about my age who was accidentally killed by her dad because she walked up behind him and he caught her with the backswing of a pickaxe. She died right around 100 years before I was born. I was born in June, and she died in August, I think. Had a major disagreement bordering on abuse with my dad while on a family vacation, and asked him to return to his house in his car, and we would return to our house in a different state in our car. While my husband and kids and I were getting organized in our car, my phone rang. It was Dad. I answered. Nobody there. It happened again. Then again, my dad was on the other side of the parking lot, getting organized himself. I got out of our car and walked over to his car to ask him what he wanted. He had no idea what I was talking about. His phone, at that point, an old-timey flip phone, was under the passenger seat of his car. When we finally found it and looked at the recent calls, there were none to my number. My dad wasn't that technologically advanced. The likelihood of him clearing calls and ditching the phone was way more than he likely would have been able to do. My only explanation was that it was some sort of divine intervention from someone looking out for us. We were able to talk some things out at that point, and he apologized. If that hadn't have happened, that likely would have been the end of our relationship. As I type this, I am on the way to his memorial service. R.I.P. Dad, and thanks to whoever provided the divine intervention. Went to visit the Myrtles plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana, with my family and some family friends. We were going down there to go to the Angola rodeo, and we all decided to take a tour of the plantation the day before the rodeo. Our group included 6 adults and 7 kids, 3 10-year-olds, an 8-year-old, 2 6-year-olds, and me, 14 at the time. The moment we arrived on the plantation, it felt like a haze started to hang on me. My mom told me later I seemed out of it. I felt like I was in a dream the whole time, floating from place to place. I barely remember the tour, but what's weird is I don't remember anything after we left. We have pictures from the plantation, all pretty creepy, and after, I don't remember going to the Angola prison to tour the museum. I don't remember the rodeo. I do remember, though, dreaming of the plantation, like I was still there, trapped. I even developed severe ulcers in my mouth, just randomly. But I didn't realize that until we got home. My mom told me I only complained about them once the whole weekend. It was when we ate at a Mexican place and I was eating salsa. For weeks after, I still felt out of it. I still dreamt of the plantation. It only stopped after I told my mom, and she told me that when I started to feel that way, to tell whatever may be stuck to me, to go away. I'm not sure if that was what finally gave me peace, but anytime I talk or think about it, it's like I'm reaching for the memory, but I can't reach it. The Myrtles plantation is definitely a cursed area. If you have the time to read about it, please do. But if you're ever in St. Francisville, Louisiana, don't go. It definitely feels like a gateway to hell. When I was a little kid, about 5, 6, I was sleeping alone in my bedroom, which I usually shared with my older sister, who was away that night. I had a lamp above the side of my bed. This is important for the story. Anyway, I went to sleep and woke up needing to go to the restroom late at night, which was across the hall. So I get out of bed and see something out of the corner of my eye. It's this hairy monster-looking thing sitting cross-legged on the floor below the nightlight on the side of the bed. This is the only time in my life I felt like I needed to scream, but nothing would come out. I was frozen in fear. The monster grabbed and put me on his lap, face down, and bit my lower back hard. Next thing I know, I wake up, and I'm hurting on my back, and I get up and look out the window. IDK, why I thought maybe I'd see something. I didn't see anything, and thought I dreamt it, and went back to sleep. Next day, my mom is putting a shirt on me, and freaks out and say, "What happened to your back?" I looked, and sure enough, there was a bloody scab in the shape of a bite. I told her the story, and she said she believed me always. Still to this day, IDK what that creature was, and I've never seen it again, even 20 years later. I still remember it like yesterday, though. I'm not spiritual. I'm not aggressive. My girlfriend and I were at my mother's doing our laundry. The washing machine and dryer are down in the basement. We head upstairs after loading everything up and get the first floor. The stairs enter the first floor into the kitchen, which is connected to the living room by a door frame without door and a small half wall that has decorations on it, which you can see over into the living and vice versa to the kitchen. These decorations are always changing, and I think at the time there was a birdhouse, candlesticks, and like stuff, and most importantly for this story, some long-legged leg and arm dolls. These dolls did not look creepy while sitting with all the other decorations, but if you found it in an abandoned house or a similar creepy situation, you probably wouldn't touch it. We walked into the living room, and I told my girlfriend I needed to grab something from the upstairs room. The staircase to the second floor is small, only 8 steps, and are on the opposite side of the half wall to the kitchen, so right next to the decorations. I head up and grab whatever it was I was getting and start heading back to the stairs. When I get to the top of the stairs and look down, I see my girlfriend with her eyes wide open. Her mouth was slightly open in shock or awe. Her skin was pale, as if he was dying. She didn't make a noise at all. I'm moving down the stairs now, semi-quickly now, asking what's wrong and what she is seeing with no answer from her. And before I know it, at the bottom of the steps with my hand on her throat. I was stunned. I immediately pulled my hand away when I noticed. It was not like a death grip, but holding on. I would never harm her or anyone, especially in that type of a situation. Really any situation. I've never hurt her before. I've never choked someone before. I've never been in a fight before. After I let go of her throat, she became more calm and was able to speak, but was still shook. I would be too if someone was just choking me. She said that the doll that was sitting with all the decorations looked at her. It was facing away as she watched me trot up the stairs, and as I was coming back, she glanced toward decorations, and the doll's head turned and looked at her. It turned as fast as a finger snap, or a blink. She knows I would not hurt her, and was confused as to my reaction of her being completely frightened, as was I. In my mind, I was moving down the stairs and asking what's wrong. I got to the bottom of the steps, and all of the sudden, my hand was on her neck. I cannot explain what she saw or why my reaction was to grab her neck. It's like I wasn't controlling myself. My reaction was confusion and asking what's wrong. I'm not spiritual at all. If spirits, gods, and demons are real, then that might explain what happened. Other than that, I have no idea. After it happened, and we had both calmed down, I remember looking at the doll. It was looking back at me. It felt evil, sinister. I was working at a Starbucks in a busy metro area. It was being renovated, but we have a really tiny / inadequate / crappy setup with which to sling drinks around temporarily. There was a bunch of partitions which made it creepy, so everyone felt like it was haunted. The phone rang, and one of the supervisors answered it and said that a woman said she was locked in the bathroom and couldn't get out. That actually has happened in the store before. So I went and checked, and both bathrooms were empty. When we tried to asterisk 69, the phone number we kept getting a disconnected error. I honestly thought that the supervisor was full of crap because I just generally hated him. Then a few minutes later, the phone rang again, and I answered it. There was a woman on the phone who sounded really distressed. She asked for Alejandra, who was another supervisor who left maybe 20 minutes earlier. I asked who she was, and she screamed, her mother. So I apologized and said she clocked out and wouldn't be back in, and she screamed, "She's my daughter. I want to talk to her." She was clearly very distressed and crying. I tend to mind my own business. Family drama is family drama, and I wouldn't want someone to make a big deal about it. So I just texted Ale when I got off work and said her mom called and sounded really upset. She immediately called me and told me her mom had been dead for years and wanted to know who called the store. She was really pissed that someone would do that, but I was creeped out, especially because someone had died in one of the bathrooms a few years earlier, was doing drugs, overdosed in the Starbucks bathroom. Either a very good actress who had personal information on the store was calling, or for 20 minutes our Starbucks landline was open for the dead to connect to the living. I get creeped out talking about it. I visited St. Augustine when I was about 9 years old with my family and some friends. While we were there, we went to the Castillo de San Marcos, a Spanish fort built in the late 1600s. In the fort, there is a corner room with no windows called the Black Room. It was used to store weapons, but was walled up for a few hundred years, and when they opened it up again, they found human skeletons in the room, meaning that they had been walled up alive. So I was alone in this part of the fort with my mom. As she was reading the description of the room, I was crouching down and looking into the room. There was a small arch to go into it. There was clearly no one else in the room, and as I said before, no windows. I suddenly felt a powerful burst of wind come shooting out of the room and go right through me. I'm not exaggerating. It felt like it went in one side of my body and out the other. I ran from one side of the fort to the other in about 30 seconds. I probably would have set a world record if someone had been timing me. I was really scared. Anyway, a bit after that, we went into the room with a big group of people, and nothing scary happened. Years later, I was watching the Travel Channel around Halloween time, and they had a documentary about Halloween attractions around the world. After that was done, Ghost Adventures came on. I usually don't watch shows like that, because I've never found them very interesting. But this episode was about the Castillo de San Marcos, so I decided to watch it. In the episode, they go into the same room, and while in the room, the host stops talking mid-sentence and says, "Oh my God, I just felt like a burst of wind go through me." Needless to say, I had goosebumps all over after seeing that on TV. I still get goosebumps while talking about it. I get it if you don't believe me, because I probably wouldn't believe it if it hadn't happened to me. But that was the creepiest thing that has happened to me that I can't explain. I went camping with 2 friends a few years ago. We went pretty far away from civilization. The nearest town had a population of 30 people and was an hour away from the lake we were at. It was cool. I usually try to get away while camping, but this was the most extreme to date, and you could feel it. During the first night, the 3 of us were sleeping in the tent when I woke up to the noise of something brushing against the tent. The tent was around 5 feet tall at its peak, and whatever was in our sight was brushing against it near the top. I have never in my life been filled with such true fear. I have camped a lot, and have had run-ins with bears and other animals and have been scared before, but this feeling was different. There was something extra unnerving about this. I stayed laying there, completely still, with my heart beating out of my chest, as whatever this was kept methodically brushing against the tent. It wasn't making much other noise, other than going back and forth on the tent. I put my finger up to my face and made the shh gesture before slowly poking my friend, who was sleeping facing me, awake. He heard the noise immediately, and his face dropped. He was wide awake, looking at me, as we just stared at each other wide-eyed. He spent a lot of time growing up on a reserve, and the accompanying, mostly untouched land in coastal BC, but later explained never experiencing anything like it. So we laid there for a minute, wide awake, practically shaking with fear, and the next thing we know, we both woke up in the morning. We woke up at the same time and immediately started asking what the hell that was last night and what happened. We both felt so awake at the time and were having trouble understanding how we just fell asleep. We explained it to our other friend as he awoke to us frantically recapping the evening. When we left the tent and went back to the site, everything looked normal. There was a half-full box of Ritz crackers that we left out. Our bad, untouched. The one thing that looked different is we had left a stack of red plastic cups out of the table, and they were all melted on one side to the point where we couldn't pull them out because they had a new indented mold. It blew our minds. We spent the whole day trying to figure out possibly how that could have occurred. It made no sense. One of my friends fell very ill as the day went on. We decided to leave that site after that next night and camped the other 2 nights of our planned trip at a more populated site closer to home, as we all very, very uneasy about what had transpired. I'm not even sure what I think happened. All I know is that that is the creepiest feeling I've ever felt. Whenever myself and the friend who I woke up get together, the conversation ends up on that night, always with the quote, "What the hell happened that night?" I've been waiting for this question, typing on mobile. Sorry if it looks messed up. My freshman year of college, I was living on the 4th floor of my dorms. It was winter time, and there was snow on the ground. It was probably around 3 or 4 in the morning, and my roommate and I had both randomly woken up, but we weren't talking, as we both thought the other was asleep. Then we both heard very clear, loud knocking on our window. 4 loud knocks that you could just tell was on glass. We both said, "Did you hear that?" and were kind of spooked. 15 minutes went by. Nothing happened. I was starting to fall back asleep, and there it was again. 4 loud knocks. At this point, I was shaking, because in my mind, someone had somehow climbed up to our window and was trying to scare the shit out of us. So I got up and pulled our blinds back to look for someone. No one was there. No footprints on the snow, on the ground. Nothing. So I got back in bed. Another 5 minutes or so, and we heard the knocking again, but it was coming from what sounded like the neighbor's window. Sure enough, we heard our neighbors say, "Dude, what the fuck?" and shuffle around a little. Then like 2 minutes later, it sounded like every single window on our floor was being knocked on for about 7 seconds straight. Just absolutely insane. People started screaming, and we could hear people opening their doors and running across the halls into their friends' rooms because they were terrified. It kept happening for probably 2 more hours, but only at specific windows, like every 15, 30 minutes. Every time I was about to fall asleep, it happened again. I even texted my boyfriend who lived on the first floor, to ask him if he also heard this, which he didn't. That was a very long night. No one ever found out what that was, as far as I know. I think I've shared this story here before, but when I was around 9 or 10 years old, my family had a big family reunion at my great-aunt's house, a giant Victorian-era mansion with a huge backyard. I remember there was nobody there my age, and all the adults became eventually drunk. So I wandered around the house and quickly found the upstairs library that I thought was neat, because it also had a back hallway with a tiny bedroom and full bathroom, probably the nanny's quarters back in the day. I remember I was sitting on the library rug, I think playing with a black and gold check printing machine, when a kid in the hallway suddenly said, "You're not supposed to play with guns, Bill." I wasn't playing with guns, and my name wasn't Bill, but I thought, cool, another kid my age. I looked back and didn't see anything. Then I hopped up and went around the door, but he was gone. I went down the stairs and found my mom and asked if she had seen a kid my age. No. I looked all around and there was nobody there my age. Then when I was a late teenager, my mother told me that her father, Bill, who had died before I was born, had killed his friend with a gun accidentally when he was 13 in that house. Nobody ever talked about it in the family. Fast forward 40 years later, I was now driving my great-aunt, Bill's sister, who had stayed in that house until she was 90, back to her assisted living apartment, age 105 now. I asked where Bill had shot that kid, and she said in the upstairs library.